I'd like to talk a little bit about scalability and manufacturing capacity, which will then lead us into a conversation about vein-to-vein time. Due to the bespoke nature of autologous CAR-T manufacturing, facilities can only produce so many therapies at once. This creates a sort of bottleneck that results in treatment delays for patients. So my first question I'll pose to Jason, since you're on my screen. To date, how has the industry improved in terms of scaling manufacturing capacity?
Hi, Tyler. Thanks for inviting me to the discussion. Really looking forward to it. I think it's important for this entire discussion to put things in some sort of historical context of new therapeutic modalities to treat unmet medical needs. It's not commonplace for these to evolve, and they take decades to evolve. And so there's tremendous excitement about CAR-Ts, cell therapy in general, mostly because of the amazing efficacy we've seen with them giving patients who had no other options, not only some extra time, but in many instances, cures of their disease. And at the same time, it's a relatively new, young baby therapeutic modality. And so I think we're just in the first couple innings of this game, maybe even, the warm-ups. And so we've come pretty far, but I think that's in the context of we still have a long way to go for this modality to reach its full potential and be a mature area. And I think what we'll be happy to talk with throughout the session today is not only where we are, not only what we can do today, but what are the important things that we invest in to accelerate an overall future, accelerate a time where cell therapy reaches its maximum potential.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. Tal, Emily, anything you'd like to add to that point before we?
Yeah, I think where we at is we showed that it works, and now it's a matter of making it more practical. So that's where the technology come into place, point of care manufacturing, which we will talk about. We know it works. We just need to make it more practical for everyone.
And I'll add.
Oh. Go ahead, Emily. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'll add on that. I think as Jason mentioned, it's been incredibly exciting to see, the potential of what cell therapy can do in the patients who have been served to date. And the thing that I'm probably most excited about in this space is, we're starting to see people say, okay, we see what's been done, and now let's figure out how to push the boundaries into new therapeutic areas, re-envisioning the modality. There's so much innovation that's happening, and it's happening so rapidly that, I don't know that we can even really completely envision what the future is going to look like yet, except to say that it's not going to be exactly the way it started, and it's, down to sort of the creativity of individuals and small organizations, it seems, to really kind of drive this thing into the future. And so I think the sky's kind of the limit there.
Yeah,
that's
great. Thank you.
That's a great comment, Emily. I really like both of your guys' comments. I think in some ways, rather than like trying to say what the winners and losers will be now, it's just as Emily was saying, how can we take that innovation? How can we help accelerate this innovation? And there's multiple ways that this field could evolve. It's so early that it's still like fog of war and hard to figure out which one is going to be the winner. That's sort of the fun part about the field, is that it's not clear exactly how it'll play out. We'll talk about some of our opinions today. But I think the thing that we should really focus on is what can we do to accelerate innovation having an impact in this field.
Thank you, Jason. I do want to get to what we all think those innovations will be in just a little bit, but in terms of scaling, I'm curious, what are currently the biggest challenges in doing so? Is it space? Is it personnel and trained staff? Or is it a technological constraint? I don't know who would like to answer that first. Jason, you're up on my screen if you want to go.
Sure.
Weigh in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those are constraints today. I think we have a great opportunity, and not to like be redundant, but I think we have an opportunity to innovate our way out of those problems, right? So today's processes are quite manual, require a lot of skilled labor. So that's a huge bottleneck if you want to scale from 1,000 to 10,000 doses and things. Training enough of a staff and training the human capital for that is a huge bottleneck. But I think long term, the solution to that won't be, hey, we're going to make faster ways of training people, or we're going to build better schools and things for training masses. It's going to be coming up with innovation in manufacturing processes, equipment, analytical approaches that require less skilled labor, less people, more automation. So that's sort of what I mean, that like today's problems, yeah, all those things you mentioned are like challenges. And you know, we can and should approach some of those today. We're invested locally here in helping local training courses and to get more youngsters involved in this great field. And that's helpful for solving, you know, today's challenges. But I think where the real investment needs to be is in solving things for tomorrow to sort of innovate our way out of some of these challenges.
Yeah.
I'd like to add just a couple of thoughts here, Tyler.
Yes.
And, you know, just to build on some of the points that Jason raised, I think, you know, when we talk about CAR-T specifically, the approved products are all autologous products, right? So we're in this paradigm of one lot per patient, and that will always throttle the pace at which material can be, you know, produced, released, and then delivered to the patients. And I think people are obviously really interested in sort of unlocking that puzzle a little bit and sort of figuring out how we scale and release some of those bottlenecks. I think there's a couple of different approaches that people are sort of exploring. One is obviously, you know, the attempts at allogeneic cell therapies, where you go from, you know, a single lot per patient to a lot that could serve hundreds or thousands of doses. Obviously, we'll get to this, but some of these massively sort of decentralized concepts where we talk about point of care manufacturing is potentially another way to resolve some of that capacity, although there's obviously challenges there. I'll just connect a little bit to what we do at Cartesian and say that we're taking what I would characterize as even a third way to think about this problem. And we do mRNA engineered cell therapy, and our lead program is an mRNA engineered CAR-T program that we're in the clinic in autoimmune disease with. And we think about the mRNA approach as being one that isn't necessarily a single one and done manufacture or one and done treatment protocol. And so we're looking for ways to manufacture multiple courses of therapy out of a single manufacturing process for a single patient, so that, you know, should a patient need to be treated again in the future, they have cells waiting for them in the freezer. So, you know, we're looking at a sort of a scaling out process, and I'm happy to expand a little bit more on that. But you know, and obviously maybe there's other sort of approaches to this as well. It'd be interesting to discuss today.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because there's the scale up and scale out. So typically, you know, an autologous process, we can get enough from what we need, but it's in a multiple dose approach, can we make more from that starting material? Can we innovate the process enough to make more? Can we expand the cells but still keep the quality similar, right? And then there's the scale out. Can we, and when I think about scale out in the autologous world, I'm thinking about, okay, how many, you know, can we make more lots in a certain unit of time, right? And that's when the automation comes into play. And we have some examples like that are currently under development, like Stellaris, the Cocoon. So, and that goes into space, in manufacturing space, right? If you could have a machine, a manufacturing equipment that can manufacture multiple lots simultaneously, then you can make more. And that also goes to the demand, right? Not every indication needs that kind of demand, right? So there's really not one size fit all, and there's different CAR T cells product, there's different indications, there's different processes, allo versus autologous. So there's really, there's no one size fit all. And I think they all have their own challenges. So it's hard to speak in generality for all CAR T cell products and all processes and all indications.
Yeah, for sure.
Just to add to that, in terms of, I think Emily and Tal brought up good points about almost subdividing innovation, right? And so I think there's innovation, as Emily was describing, about, hey, can we come up with basically a different modality that gets us around some of the challenges with autologous cell therapy? And there's been a lot of investment in that space as we were talking about allo and things. I think we just have to recognize that that kind of innovation is like a whole different modality, and separate that a little bit from investing in innovation in a modality that's now, proven to have efficacy that works. But how can we make it more scalable? How can we make it more economically and more available? What I see in the field, I'd be interested in the other panelists, but what I've seen in the field over the last 5 years is that the challenge of scaling autologous is a big one. It's like a whole new approach when you're having to redefine an entire supply chain where you start with the patient and manufacture from that as starting material, and then as Emily said, making just one dose per batch, or for one patient. So it's a whole different paradigm for manufacturing. And so I think where I see the field has been doing for the last 5 years is trying to innovate around or outside of autologous cell therapies and investing huge amounts of money in those other areas. And those have, game changer potential. It's just that each of those shots on goal is very expensive to develop essentially a whole new therapeutic modality. Where I think I see some aspects over the last couple years, and I hope to see more of it, is more innovation to invest in the modality of autologous cell therapy that has proven efficacy, but how can we make it more accessible to more patients?
Yeah.
And so I think just being intentional about which areas we're innovating in is an important aspect for us to.
I think people have really been trying to shorten the process, but unfortunately there's biology, right? Cells have certain expansion kinetics. You have the kinetics of transduction. So you could innovate within those spaces to try to shorten the process, but at the end of the day, you'd also have to show that it didn't impact the quality of the product. So, and there are a lot of innovations of the process itself, right? To make the same thing just more efficient, more cost-effective, shortened. But yeah, I think what we're getting at is, can we make the same product using the same process, but make more lots like that quicker? And again, that brings me back to the indication. Like, is there even demand to make more? Do we need that? Not for all indications. Indications like solid tumors, or somebody developing a CAR-T to address multiple types of solid tumors, you would need to make more. You'd have more demand, right? Even if you're planning on selecting an indication for pivotal and BLA at the beginning, you'd have to manufacture more. So that's what I mean, where it's like, it's not always necessary. It just really depends on the indication and on the product.
I think the other challenge that we haven't really brought up yet in the context of sort of how do you drive, Jason, to the point you made, the innovation to make a process that already exists and we know works for patients better, is how do you find the resources to develop that? A couple of people have said already, it's a very expensive process to make and execute. It's expensive to develop a process. It's expensive to get a process approved. And there's I think the markets are actually set up to really incentivize that new modality, new indication sort of paradigm. And, our system of developing early stage biotech companies and financing innovation isn't as well suited to supporting, I'm just going to take this thing that already works and make it a little bit better. And especially for, teams and companies that already have a process that is, very far down the path, either already approved or towards approval, changing a process, and sort of managing then the way the regulatory sort of requirements intersect with process changes to drive innovation. All of that gets complicated and expensive and time consuming, and we don't have great mechanisms to support that when, really the venture space, for example, is really focused on new modality, new indication, sort of the next sort of bleeding edge technology that's essentially in many cases unproven.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great point. I mean, I think that's exactly, Emily, you said it so well. That's exactly what's happened over the last 5 years, is there's been a lot of investment in allo because, I mean, like it's cool. It's an easy concept. Easy as to flip in a word, but you can really get your arms around it and do it in a pitch deck to a VC, and they could be like, okay, I get it. I hope I don't know whether I hope. I wish it worked better over, we saw more durability, we saw more persistence, and it could have made all of our lives a lot easier. I think what we've realized over the last 5 years is that it's not as easy as, the initial allo pitch decks would have indicated. And so I do think that and I think this is already happening, to your point of where does this incremental innovation come from? And I think now that there are, what are we up to, 8 now? Cell therapies, sort of mainstream cell therapies with Adaptimmune and being approved just recently. Now that those, and some of them, most of them are in the hands of large companies, they have these technical development groups. They have these large groups that can start doing more incremental investment in process improvements. I think we saw J&J and Kite both last year released some information about how they innovated and reduced their processing time from 14 to 12 days and took that. So that's at least a different kind of funding for innovation that comes from the commercialization of these products. And I think the other area that may sync up a little bit with what you're saying, Emily, is starting even autologous therapies with some more viewpoint of how are we going to scale those. I think this happened a lot with antibodies field 30 years ago. When we first developed antibodies, it was just find something good that binds the target. But then over the course of a decade or more, when we were doing clone selection, when we were picking the optimal construct, we would put in a manufacturability assessment and like, hey, this clone expresses higher levels than others, so we're going to include that in our assessment. Even how we designed monoclonals to be like fully human rather than chimeric or other aspects helped with the overall manufacturing and mostly clinical profile of these. So I hope we'll be able to get innovation in product development that will help manufacturing as well.
Thanks, Jason.
I agree. Oh, if
Sorry,
I could just make one more comment, Tyler.
Yeah.
I guess the other piece that I'd add to that, Jason, is I think that eventually the market is going to have to push us to a place of greater efficiency, because in order to expand the potential of cell therapy and reach more patients, more indications, particularly some of these larger disease areas that people are hoping we can start to move into, the manufacturing process is going to have to get faster. It's going to have to get less expensive. It's going to have to get more efficient, in order to meet that demand that's coming. So, it'll get there, I'm sure. If this whole arc is going to have a long trajectory, which I certainly hope it does.
I mean, I think that's a great point. I mean, I think the push is there. I don't think there's any lack of push. It's just, to your earlier point, is there enough areas of investment to help meet that challenge of investing to meet that push? Like, if today's CAR-Ts were more, let's say, profitable, I think those companies would, build up even more, tech ops staff and things to invest more in product development. So I think that I take your point. It's how do we meet this challenge of the push and the to scaling, and how do we get enough investment and focus on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what Emily's mentioned, that basically if we have indications that are less rare, right, that's what I take by the market pushes there. There's more demand, so we need to increase our capacity. That will drive innovation. But there are, current more rare conditions where I doubt that we need to manufacture so much more than we're already manufacturing, more in the BLA space, right? So you need to have the market, you need to have innovation to introduce it to new indications that haven't been looked at before, and it's happening right now. And I think that's when that will force you to innovate, because you would need to increase your capacity in a significant way.